Welcome everybody on this very, very rainy day in Delhi to discuss, uh, for this latest edition of Neighbourhood Scope, which is on one of the most important countries in India's neighborhood, Maldives. Uh, I must thank everybody who's in this room today because I myself was panicking coming to ORF today because I'm dreading the prospect of going back home. I don't even know if I will reach on time, at what time I'll reach. So, thank you everybody for being here today. And thanks a lot to our two guests from Maldives who are with us. We have Maria Didi, who is a former defense minister in the Maldives, currently in the opposition, but a very popular politician. We have Ataullah Rashid, who's a scholar and has worked in the Maldivian government and is somebody who has been associated with the ORF in the past as well. We have the redoubtable Smita Sharma, a journalist and an old friend who's also out here. Her beat has been foreign policy, so we thought it would be good to get her view on how things are unfolding between India and the Maldives. And last but not the least, we have my colleague Aditya Gowda, who is our resident scholar on the Maldives and among other countries that he deals with, and one of the people responsible for putting together today's show. So thanks, Aditya, for being out here. So let me set the ball rolling because the backdrop, of course, of this conversation on the Maldives is Prime Minister Modi's visit to the Maldives, and what seems like a major reversal in the relationship between the two countries, because just a couple of years back it was the obituaries of India Maldives relations were being written, and yet a year or two later we have seen the relationship back on track, and in fact, in some ways, more stable than what it has been in the past. So let me start this discussion by first asking Ataullah Rashid, what do you think, from your perspective as a scholar, as somebody who's worked in the government, as a bureaucrat, what do you think has led to this transformation, considering that this entire relationship had, with the entire India Out campaign which was being carried out, what do you think has changed for in the last couple of months, maybe a little longer, for this relationship to come back on an even keel, Mr. Dr. Rashid?
Thank you very much. Before I start, I would like to acknowledge and also thank ORF for inviting me. It's a privilege to sit here and also be part of the conversation. Also, Minister Maria, nice to meet you. I mean, not only a fellow Maldivian, but also a very close friend of my family. So I think I'll feel comfortable, but also wear my scholar hat or maybe the academic hat mostly in explaining the best of to the best of my ability your question. So I think there are multiple factors in anything that we do to analyze what's happening in Maldives India relations right now. And the first thing I consider is that how small states actually have been recently in the recent decades navigating their interests in the vast great power politics. And I think that has a lot to do with how Maldives over the years have also come to the spotlight of international politics and regional politics. And coming down to the specific questions that you asked about the relationship between the two countries and how Maldives and India have actually been in a position to better communicate, especially considering the recent visit of Prime Minister Modi to Maldives, would be something that transcends between domestic and international or regional politics. So, in my view, the short answer is that Maldives and India has always maintained a very strong relationship, and that has been based on people to people as well as government to government communication and contact and engagements, and that hasn't actually changed anytime. What we see on the surface level or at the domestic political level is still kept aside on my analysis to explain the importance of the relationship that's ongoing. And what has happened right now, even in the most current, throughout the most current visit, is also that the improvement of that relationship, something to further strengthen a strong relationship. Now, going back to the domestic factors, as we know that Maldives has also recently undergone democratic change. It's a new democracy, something to start around in 2008. And since then, we have seen many changes domestically due to many factors that has to do with the institutional system that we already had before and how that has been impacting the current system and the progress of that current system. And this has also much to do with how the foreign policy has evolved when government changed or changes with different type of priorities, and also to pitch their political interests before the domestic constituencies. And the time that we saw some level of disagreements or maybe some level of differences in rhetoric in explaining how Maldives actually feel in terms of foreign policy or its approach to India has much to do with domestic politics, not to do with the principles or the existence of foreign policy or foreign relations between the two countries. So right now, what we are seeing today is a positive trajectory in view of understanding a strong relationship between the two countries. I think I'll stop there for now, and happy to say more if there's more questions. Thank you.
You, Dr. Rashid. Let me come to you, Maria Didi. You know, Dr. Rashid has given a scholarly, I would probably even go to the extent of saying an academic bureaucratic answer. Now, let's have some fireworks from you, since you are an opposition leader and you're a politician. Perhaps you will not hold your punches. So, what do you think has led to this transformation? And I mean also in the sense that, you know, it was a pretty strident campaign, that entire India Out campaign, which was led by the president and his party, or his coalition rather. And then we've seen that there's this transformation which has taken place. Now, an obvious question, of course, to you as a political leader would be this transformation that takes place. How does it play out in domestic politics? In the sense that how does the ruling party then explain to its core constituency, which it riled up on the India Out campaign, that look, we don't want India out, we want India in. And then how does the opposition take this transformation? If you can just deal with both those sides of the question.
Thank you very much, ORF, for holding this conference at a very important time. And the topic itself, I don't know whether we will find a magic answer to it. We've been puzzling over it for ages, and I'm sure, you know, that this question will remain, whether this can be taken forward in a constructive way. We have to, I think, and also this is a real neighborhood discussion, because India and Maldives are neighbors, and me and Dr. Ataullah are also neighbors. So this is a real neighborly discussion as it starts off. Now, as Dr. Ataullah also put it, the problems between India and Maldives, I would say this rhetoric, this political tensions arose during President Yamin's time in about 2016, if I may say so. Before that, after President Yamin was also sworn in, he made India his first port call state visit. And after that also, I think he was the one who coined the phrase India first. We've always had an India first policy, but the phrase was coined by Yamin. But in 2016, when he put all political prisoners in jail, and also when the Commonwealth threatened him with suspension, the CMAC, I think President Yamin thought India could persuade the Commonwealth not to do that. At the same time, he went for a visit also there, but I'm not sure because I wasn't in government what happened. Now, after that, in 2018, when the Supreme Court came out with a judgment in February 2018 that all political leaders have to be freed, and that judgment itself, President Yamin came on record after he was released from prison, and then he spoke on a podium and said, that India outstarted with this thing where India inquired into the status of the judgment, why he was not enforcing the judgment and all that. That is what he said on the podium, that he saw these two actions, Commonwealth taking their Maldives to CMEG, and the fact that the Supreme Court of Maldives had come up with a judgment and President Yamin was ignoring it, and India asking about it as an interference in internal politics. It was then that he suddenly said that Indian, those military assets that are here purely on a humanitarian capacity should go. What I'm trying to say is, as Dr. Ataullah said, in 2008, we, the Maldivian people, expressed our wishes for our country to be democratically ruled. We wanted free and fair elections, transparency and all that. A vibrant multi-party opposition to be there as well. So with multi-party governance that the Maldivian people has aspired to and chosen, if President Yamin goes to India and he wants India to say that, to support him with Commonwealth and all that, that is a huge predicament for India, because India is a democratic country, the oldest democracy the largest democracy in the world, So naturally, the thing is, whenever a PPM, PNC government comes in or there is a campaign, we see that they become ultra-nationalist and talk about these things because they come from a dictatorial background and hardline as well. They want all the opposition to be in jail, or they want freedom of media to be curtailed. There's so many things that would happen because their type of governance is more dictatorial, not giving opportunity for the people to have their voices. Even now, since President Muizzu came also, he has made sure that the parliament is tied up, and the parliament is the institution that is there to oversee the independence of all other institutions. So it is, what would I say, separation of ideas, the way we think about how we should be governed. We talk about transparency, we talk about democracy, we talk about human rights, we don't want to take action against opposition leaders and all that, whereas they come from another tradition. So always PPM, PNC will be looking not very favorably with India, but would always see as India siding with domestic politics as with us. This is what I think. It is a difference of the way of thinking for both parties and the way we want to govern that makes them go into the question. Maybe I've gone on for too long, but this is how I see it.
I think it's very interesting what you've said, Smita. This is resembles somewhat what the former Canadian Prime Minister Stephen Harper said at one of the Raisina dialogues. That look, a lot of the writing on India in the Western media is colored by their own ideological predilections. It doesn't have much to do with India, really. It's about their own ideological fights, which are then, they rope in India. It seems something similar is happening out there. But I then also wonder that, is it mostly just that? Or is there something also where maybe India should, look at its own policies, maybe something we have done, which actually makes us something of a political football in the neighborhood. Do you think there is something in that where we become a kind of a political football? What are your views on it?
Thanks, Sushant. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Aditya, and good to see our online guests and everybody who's made it to the room. We are not having this conversation under the sea, but we are also hoping that outside the roads are not turning into canals as we talk so that Sushant can drive back home. Coming...
Or maybe somebody should organize a boat for me since...
You just swim, Sushant. Just swim.
Since Delhi becomes Venice
I know, the
in
Venetian
these months,
canals.
Yeah.
Coming to your question and coming to this discussion today, which is a very timely one. And before I come to your question, I think, at the start when you said that we were writing an obituary of the relationship and then we saw sort of this absolute turnaround. It's not something that, first of all, comes as a surprise to anybody who watches not just Maldives, but the neighborhood. I think it's a familiar story that plays out every now and then, every few years, with sometimes it's Sri Lanka, sometimes it's Bangladesh, sometimes it's Maldives. This time, actually, that what you refer to as the obituary period, mercifully, it did not last too long. It was a year and a half, compared to, say, for instance, the Yamin period before, the Ibu Soli period. So if you had a period then which lasted for 5 years long, you also had the Ibu Soli India first period that lasted till, of course, President Muizzu came in. And President Muizzu, I think, to understand this situation, what is happening here, it is important to understand that if there are some things, I'm not going to get into the agenda with which Western media is writing, because I think I'm also coming to the table here, not just as a journalist, but with whatever little understanding of the foreign policy that I have here. Of course, there are agendas in every newsroom. Of course, there are also priorities for every newsroom depending on which geography they are representing and which part of the world they are in. It is affected by the politics of the day and the politics of the country. But there are two things to, I think, take a look here. One is, as is the topic of the discussion, to understand President Muizzu. Where does he come from? What does he want? What is his path going forward? And B, then to look at that, while we have had a reset and while the Prime Minister did go and say, it almost reminded you of the Pak China hyperbole of this all-weather friendship, deep like the ocean, high like the sky, when he mentioned that this friendship will be bright and clear, if I'm not mistaken, the words that he used, regardless of the weather, suggesting that this will be an all-weather friendship. It's interesting to, I think, look at President Muizzu's inaugural address that he made on 17th of November 2023. And I'm quoting from there, where he said that there should be no difference between big and small. It should be respected. Hopefully, I will not allow that right to be taken away. Hopefully, we will make Maldives a country without any other foreign troops. Of course, he was also building out on that India Out campaign. Then he did have a meeting with Prime Minister Modi along the sidelines of COP. Sadly, by December and January, you saw the entire controversy around Lakshadweep that played up, and I'll come to it in just a bit. In 24th of September, the next year, when he was addressing the General Assembly, there again, and because in 2040, Maldives celebrates the 75th year of independence, he says, by 2040, I wish to see the Maldives as a full-fledged developed nation, a nation that commands respect, is relevant, and one that embodies resilience, a society that is inclusive and just, a country that exemplifies sustainability and democratic governance. This is something that we have been hearing a lot of emphasis on from leaders who have been coming up the ranks in our neighborhood also, especially the words like respect and resilience. So clearly what President Muizzu here has been wanting to do, is to build that tag that we may be a small nation, but what he said after the entire controversy is that nobody has a license to bully us, because that is important. That is what sells with his domestic constituency, on the waves of which, of course, he rode to power. And how does he build resilience? For resilience, my understanding is that he's looking, of course, at economic resilience, at defense resilience. Economic resilience is where India comes in as a very, very important power. Defense resilience is where he is doing tie-ups, whether it's with China, whether it's with Turkey, buying the Turkish drones from them, building the Turkish drones, mount on some island to allow for surveillance of the waters. But it's also interesting that I think between these, somewhere there is also an aligning of President Muizzu's ideas at looking at a larger Islamic nation alignment to counter a sole dependence, say for instance, on China, or a sole dependence on India, where these countries not only align with him ideologically and religiously, but also bring in some investments to counter these powers. So whether it's UAE, it's interesting that, my information says that actually President Muizzu had said he would come to India first on his first overseas visit. But within 3 weeks, he decided that because he hadn't heard back from India, he decided that Turkey would be his first stopover. Unlike, the Nepalese prime ministers who actually wait for months. Prime Minister Oli waited literally for 4 months before he could come into India for his first visit. So, I think to understand that what President Muizzu is playing at, he definitely seems to me a much more practical version than a President Yamin, who knows, who has learned from his mistakes, who also knows that he needs a country like India to be with him. Now, I'll just take a couple of minutes to come to the India question. Having covered the Sri Lankan presidential elections last year, having looked at the AKD model, again, there you had somebody who was very strong on anti-India rhetoric in the campaign times, who was very strong about his views on, he would cancel off all plans, particularly the Adani firms, the contracts, and things like that. When he came into power, you did see him taper down a lot. So far, he has done things right. With India, when the Lakshadweep incident again happened, if you look at Prime Minister Modi's comments on Lakshadweep, that was meant to promote Lakshadweep as a tourist destination. Unfortunately, and this is one of the harsh realities of the hyper social media, ultra-nationalist camps that we see today, it was blown up and propagated as this was Prime Minister Modi's direct attack and a taking on of Maldives, that, you don't need to go Maldives. And then it turned into a boycott Maldives campaign with a lot of these private players coming in and then, getting themselves wrapped in Indian national flag and trying to play that nationalism card to win some favors. And then you had that unfortunate episode of 3 junior ministers actually making those very, very, unfortunate remarks against Prime Minister Modi. Prime Minister's comments on Lakshadweep was also timed because Lakshadweep was going to elections in April. So there was that domestic angle. I think for India, just some of the lessons from our neighborhood constantly has been, we do much better in our neighborhood when we resort to quiet diplomacy. While I do like to believe that India has been a benevolent neighbor, which reflects whether it's in our line of credits, whether it reflects in our terms and conditions for loans compared to the Chinese loans. Unfortunately, India does deal with that tag of being a bully or a big brother. There's no use in disliking India and whipping up sentiments against India because of our geographical size. We are who we are. We have an economy that is strong. We have an economy that is comparable to the world stage. But there are sometimes these statements that are made with an eye on domestic politics that get picked up by those who are wanting to look for an opportunity to whip up trouble. And it gives them an opportunity to do so. In doing so, while we do not mean that there will be no reset of those turbulent ties in days to come, but every time you have a time period of turbulence followed by a reset, I think there is some damage done in terms of the trust factor, which can be avoided. So my only submission as I come back to you would be that for India, I think in the neighborhood, once again, India has to be careful when it makes statements on domestic politics. There are a lot of people who are wanting to run with ultranationalism. It doesn't help our foreign policy. It doesn't help to have too much of a muscular approach. And I think India also definitely needs to, in this visit of the Prime Minister, you had a lot of very visible outcomes and visible agreements from India, whether it's housing units, whether it's building a defense ministry building, whether it's the line of credit itself, the amount, whether it's reducing the loan amount. These are all very tangible sort of gives from India. So it's not just soft power, it's hard power that involves defense, it's hard power that involves money, it's hard power that involves putting your money where your mouth is. These things need to continue. And my final caution would be, I think while we know that, at the moment, the relationship definitely looks nice. And Vikram Misri said on the Lakshadweep question that, let's not focus on the past, let's move on. There are lessons to be learned from every, incident in the past. I just think that we are living in a time today where there is no new normal anymore. So this is not going to remain a new normal. There will be times where we will have turbulence returning into, which will be either triggered by Maldives' own internal politics, how President Muizzu is able to handle the economic recovery and resilience of the country, whether, the people who are supporting him at the moment stay with him or not. So the idea that India does not invest in eggs in one basket anymore, the fact that Prime Minister Modi goes in there and also meets with President Nasheed, also meets with opposition leaders, I think that's a much healthier lesson learned from some of our mistakes in the neighborhood, and that needs to continue.
Aditya, let me just turn to you with two issues. One, which Smita has raised, and I want to put that to you. And I think on the facts, she's right, that there was this social media furor campaign, which was then picked up by some of the travel companies, which is all very well. But that was in stark contrast to how the government was reacting to what was happening in Maldives. And from the government level, there doesn't seem to have been any adverse comment, any disparaging remark. And I can understand that when passions arise in the social media, it becomes very difficult for the government to actually, sidestep all of those things. And yet, I think the way that entire relationship was handled showed a certain degree of maturity with which India approached that entire problem. And that seems to have yielded dividends. So I'm not a Maldives expert, you are. So I just want to get your view on how you think India handled that aspect of, when things seem to be going downhill, it seemed that at least at the governmental level, I won't say so much at the popular level, but at least at the governmental level, they didn't react in a knee-jerk manner. Second was what, again, Smita touched upon, and I want you to elaborate on that. What exactly are right now, in your view, the economic compulsions in Maldives? What are the challenges? What are the compulsions? Some of which I would imagine, make it impossible to say that India out. That it is better to have India in and as a partner in the growth story of Maldives than to, simply have this India out kind of a campaign and then, not have any alternative in place, because no alternative can actually replace India given the tyranny of geography. What is your view on it?
No, I think so. Both of these issues are somehow intertwined. But firstly, speaking about the lack of adverse reaction or a hostile reaction to the whole development, I think what could be traced is, in fact, we had expected this. The Indian side had expected this would come. If there is a government that has been elected on nationalism, purely on domestic political basis, they will try to take out any opportunity that it presents to them, to bring out that nationalist rhetoric. And also, mind you, a lot of people who were involved, including the deputy ministers, were not any, they were political activists. They didn't know what differentiates a political activist from someone who holds a government portfolio or a government position. No defense, but this is what happened. But I think what changed is India had expected this. India knew that certain kind of reactions would come. And it tried to play, silent diplomacy right from the initial days that Muizzu came to power. In November, when he swore in, I think there was still optimism in India. We will engage with him. We will talk to him. We'll try to figure out our issues. In fact, we had sent one of our cabinet ministers, union ministers, rather than state ministers when we were invited. And I think that was a sign to come that we will continue engaging with you. In December, PM Modi met Muizzu. Again, there were negotiations. In both of the cases, Muizzu put forth his demands of withdrawal of Indian troops and what he expects from India. And I think there were some honest conversations that were happening out right from there. And it was in that meeting in December where both India and Maldives, realized that they will come up with a high-level core group meeting. So this was more of a closed-door conversation happening on a more transparent basis, on a more engaging basis, rather than what rhetoric or domestic politics demands. So that was that realization. And when this whole issue blew up in January, it was also a time when India was quietly assuring Maldives that, we will be withdrawing our troops and replacing them with civilian personnel. So I think India was continuing to build up on that positive momentum. India did silently signal that whatever is happening will have repercussions if they are not rectified. I think Minister Jaishankar meeting Musa Zamir a couple of days after this event in a NAM summit in Uganda, where he said that we had an honest conversation about the bilateral relationship, is itself indicative that there were conversations, but on the Indian side, there was much more optimism and pragmatism when it came to dealing with Muizzu and his demands. Eventually, in May, India, withdrew its troops and exchanged them with the personnel. So I think India had expected this, and they took it more calmly and in a more engaging way, knowing that it's domestic politics. Let's differentiate that from our foreign policy. But that said, there are red lines, and you don't have to cross it. I think that's what turned out to be from such level of high engagements that shaped out later. Now, as far as the economy is concerned, again, I think when Muizzu took over the economy was already in bad shape. It was not of his creation, but it is a substantial economic structural problem that has existed in the Maldives for a long, long time. The country is an island nation, is an archipelago nation. It depends on imports. It cannot produce itself for whatever it's worth. So yes, there has always been trade deficit. And then second, then there came this budget deficit because, the freebie politics of it. And obviously having generated less revenues, so they wanted more grants, more loans to keep their engagement.
You're from Karnataka. You would know a lot about freebie politics.
That will be a different panel by itself. But that was the case, right? I mean, they when Muizzu swore in, the debts were around like $6.5 billion, and most of the debt was domestic. To be honest, Maldives has taken a lot from domestic rather than external. But externally speaking, there were private sector bonds, treasuries, China, and then came India. So Yamin had borrowed a substantial amount of them for Belt Road initiatives, and during the COVID time, Soli government also had to borrow because to sustain their economy, and then India also became a big-time assistance provider to Soli government when this whole thing developed. So these loans started to mature when Muizzu came in. The Chinese were already maturing, and Indians were yet to mature. So from 6.5 billion, which was around 97% of the GDP, today the economic situation is around 122% of GDP. That debt takes around 122%, right? So it is $9 billion now, which is again an increase from what it was in the past. And what is happening are the Chinese loans are maturing, the treasury bills, the bonds are maturing, the Muizzu government is continuing to service them. At the same time, Indian loans have now matured and some of them have to be repaid. So that makes India one of the biggest bilateral creditor to the Maldives. But again, most of this is domestic, around 5.5 billion, around 3.4 billion or 5 billion is external. Nonetheless, India now seems to be the biggest bilateral creditor. So what India did was, try to use both carrots and incentives, and to a certain extent, show that we could also help the economy if the case, if you rectify your whatever anti-Indian rhetoric that's going on. And then Muizzu went on to China. China talked big, delivered very little. Till now, they have given $75 million assistance and another $100 million in grant. But apart from that, they have done nothing. They had promised that they would restructure debts for next 5 years. They have not done anything. So Muizzu had to make a U-turn somewhere, and India was that reliable partner. So we rolled over $100 million, and then we again extended $400 million in US dollars in terms of a currency swap, then another 300, and now finally again $565 million in a line of credit, which replaces the previous line of credit. So India has stood there, understanding the economic compulsions that the government is going through, and it has also reduced the debt burdens by restructuring some of this line of credit. So overall, the debt has now, according to MEA, it reduces the debt burden annually by 40%, right? But that doesn't solve the problem. Muizzu has to service around 600 million by the end of this year, another 1 billion by the end of next year. How will he do it? It's a difficult question. There are fiscal reforms which are difficult domestically as well. Some of the reforms he has brought in has upset the tourist tycoons, obviously, who has a significant stake in Maldivian economy. And some of the reforms he has brought in is to also, is increasing taxation or reducing any kind of projects. It is going to anger people. So he has a big question there. How will he do it is a bigger question. How will India be able to, continue assisting Muizzu apart from these kind of reliefs that it's giving? It also leaves us a point to wonder where we are heading from there. But the economic situation is as dire as it could be.
My sense is that China is also playing a little cautious with investing in President Muizzu at the moment because of all the economic problems that he is faced with, and given their own, of course, politics of the day. And
that's standard Chinese diplomacy, because you first give a lot of loans, then when the guy gets into trouble, then you hold back on the loans, you let somebody else bail them out so that your money comes back. Then you start loaning them all over again. We've seen that in country after country after country. But Dr. Rashid, if I can turn to you now, we've heard about the politics, we've heard about the international diplomacy, bilateral diplomacy with India, we've heard about the economic situation. But I'm a little curious to know how you make out the security situation, not just in terms of the threat or the perceived threat of Islamic radicalism in Maldives, about which a lot has been written. And the numbers are not very complimentary for a country like Maldives, which at one level is seen as a tourist paradise, but another level, there are numbers like the highest per capita, which is again, I think one should take it with a pinch of salt, but the highest per capita representatives in the ISIS, right? So it's not exactly a good advertising label for a tourist paradise. But so one is that particular factor. The second is the larger security dimension in the Indian Ocean, where Maldives is sitting astride important shipping lanes. Uh, how, in your view, is Maldives trying to grapple with these particular challenges? Because we've spoken about some of the steps that President Muizzu took insofar as reclaiming Maldives' security resilience is concerned. But I was wondering if you could just elaborate a little more on these kind of challenges and how the government is proposing to deal with them. Dr. Rashid.
Thank you again. A very interesting question. In fact, interesting two questions, I would say. But before I answer to one of them, I have to acknowledge that I'm not a specialist or have no specialization in the area of Islamic radicalism or counterterrorism. But I would definitely shed light into that question and an answer to that one in terms of small state security and where Maldives sits in that framework. So Maldives, as you know, is 100% Muslim country and has a constitution that based on Sharia. And we have a population that practices Islam and also follows the constitution, and the democratic system and institutions are based in that framework. And the society is modern looking and seeks to moderate and also move forward with the global development. That's something that you would see through our tourism industry. Since 70s, we have actually excelled most of the international markets to show that the economy is capable of advancing, also meeting with the international markets. So that means we have a democracy, we have a population that seeks democratic growth, and also a capitalist-based market system that is way advanced and produces a lot, that actually puts a lot of pressure on governments to manage those funds in terms of good governance and producing socio-economic benefits. So that's the general formula. And then comes with our interactions with the rest of the world and the ideas and identities that actually interact with us through different means. Democracy did not only open the society to practical or material resources. It also exposed the society into different types of ideologies and also different types of views that you could actually promote in your own space. So this is one area in which the government, not only this one, but also has been doing that through the security system or the security services to address the micro level threats that actually comes from, that actually grows within the society as the society interacts with different sorts of ideologies. And this is one area where counterterrorism or de-radicalization work that we have been doing in the security sector. I'm referring to we as Maldives has been doing in the security sector, has actually done a lot of work and continue to do carefully engaged practices within the communities to address them. And as far as the broader security spectrum is concerned, of course, Maldives sits in a vast ocean, like it was mentioned here. And since it's a very small state covering a large ocean that interacts and also interfaces with the broader Indian Ocean, there's a lot that we have to deal with the limited capacities we have. I'm referring to the security services capacities. Counterterrorism also fits within this as well. So the lack of capacity that we have in addressing our security matters within this broader Indian Ocean or within this broader ocean region adds to that challenge in addressing issues related to terrorism or counterterrorism. And it also adds to the other multiple problems that we have starting with IUU fishing to piracy to regional drug trafficking and all other issues that actually transcends and with the ocean territory. So as far as the national security is concerned, maritime security is one of the cornerstones and very primary area that actually cannot be separated from our broader security policy or security thinking. And then in that aspect, I always try to equate capacity with cooperation, that is development cooperation. So the way in which our foreign policy and also defense cooperation has been there for a long time, through engaging with regional partners, including India, Sri Lanka, and also other states that fit within those regional frameworks to build capacity within the region, has contributed to build the capacity of Maldives as well. So Coast Guard is one of the areas where I always start to give examples from. And one of those examples comes with, you would know, if you know Indian Ocean corporations, about the trilateral agreement or cooperation we have through DOSTI, that is Maldives, India, Sri Lanka engagement of Coast Guard and Navy. So basically that actually shows how the capacity is directly related to regional cooperation. So of course, there are different steps, especially right now, taken to build capacity individually through bilateral relations, by building technologies or maybe transferring those technologies from extra-regional actors, and also making different defense cooperation with extra-regional actors beyond the Indo-Pacific partners we have maintained traditionally. So that would add value to the domestic capacities to an extent. But considering the broader ocean or the broader region that we need to address while addressing national security, I think the close regional cooperation that we have in the defense sector as well as the security sector are important. I will stop there. Thank you.
So I want to revert back to the political scene in Maldives, and Maria Didi, this is where you come in. How do you see the politics now play out? We have seen that one of the fundamental pillars on which President Muizzu and parties which are opposed to your party have fought or built their politics has been the anti-India campaign. And of course, there are other things as well which they have been using to burnish their politics. Now, if one of their principal platforms is no longer operative, where does that leave politics in Maldives? How do we see the political scene unfold in the coming months, years, given the kind of economic challenges that confront the island state, given the fact that there are very serious climate change challenges which also Maldives faces, and we are living in a very, very uncertain world, and domestic politics has to be able to cater to those kind of challenges. So as a politician, as somebody who served as Minister of Defense, how are you looking at how things are likely to unfold going forward?
Since Prime Minister Modi's visit, we remain optimistic. We do not like to shout in the face of President Muizzu that he has taken a U-turn, but that we do in the national interest, that it is important for him to be able to continue with the close relationship that we have in India. But he still has problems in his own party. Still, there's President Yamin and the elements of his party, but they are bi-weekly meetings where they are criticizing President Muizzu for what he has done. They still go on this very ultra-nationalistic agenda. We see that President Muizzu hasn't really been able to onboard the ultra extremist Islamist elements that he has within his government. That we saw when Sajida's own brother, the First Lady's own brother, Abdullah Janab, he put out a very inappropriate tweet when Prime Minister Modi was just about to come to the Maldives, which he later deleted, saying, and the newspaper report said that it was deleted because he didn't follow the process in which the tweet should come. So that doesn't mean that he was denying anything, or he wasn't of the opinion, or Salaf wasn't of the opinion that the tweet, what was said in the tweet, but that it was the process which made him delete it. And what we see is, even with the security landscape, what we find is he has announced death penalty for drug dealing, for drug importation as well. Whereas during our times, we operated the Indian Donia to make sure, that we have surveillance for drugs and narco trafficking in the area. We have many operations where we sit together and survey the area. So when he suddenly proposes legislation to make harsher penalties, that's reactive. We were proactive, not allowing the drugs to come in. So what we are seeing is, like, even the education ministry at the moment is given to Salaf. So what we wonder is whether there is an ultra, as you also mentioned, an ultra-Islamist agenda behind President Muizzu's government, which wants to take us in the path of, like, a longer plan to have Islamists rule the country. Whatever be it, the optimism that we have is totally based on the economic situation. I think that he is in the difficulties that he has had to face because of, as you all said, China not coming to the help and all that. Because even now, I still have to go back to democratic ideals as well, because we all know that a Turkish contingent is there, a military contingent is there in Mahfar Island to operate those drones that he bought for this staggering 39 million, the 3 drones that he bought from Turkey. But even on President Yamin's bi-weekly meetings, he is not talking about Turkey or the military. So it is not about a military contingent being here in a humanitarian capacity or anything. It is just his or their party's ultra-nationalist agenda, and especially more targeted at India than anything else that is going on, which is what I feel. And President Muizzu is from PPM-PNC, and to have people within his party eternally bombard him of what was going on and what is going on, and like confuse the concepts of what is being done and all that. President Muizzu has to really work hard, to educate his people on what it means to be independent, sovereign in today's world. Because for them, their idea of independence seems to be isolation, not really independent in today's world, where there is independence and dependence, where all states, big or small, are independent but dependent on each other. So for him to be able to sustain the good intentions and the relationships between the two countries, there is local elections coming up. Then that is in next year in 2026, and after that we will be going to the general elections in 2028. But during that time, he himself will be at much risk. There is the question of the economic situation. There's the debts that are owed to China. And then when you talk about security as well, IUU fishing, he came and he sort of didn't go ahead with the hydrography agreement that we had signed with India during our time. Now, one of the biggest national security threats that we could have is a huge oil spill in our country. You know, we are having charts dating back to the 1800s, and we have 4 main sea lanes of communication that run through Maldives. Now, we are having all these huge oil tankers that are carrying oil from the Middle East to India, to China, to Australia, to Indonesia, pass through Maldives. Now, if there is an incident, an oil spill, okay, we have small boomers that could perhaps, oil booms that could perhaps be used to contain it for a smaller spill. But we need the assistance of India and bigger neighbors, as has been seen in Sri Lanka as well, where they have to come to our rescue because our whole livelihood depends on our maritime. So we understand, we know that many reefs have moved since the tsunami, islands have come up, others have been gone down. So these sort of things are there. But President Muizzu did sign an agreement with China for oceanic research and all that. Now, that doesn't seem to be a problem with even President Yamin and everybody else who are coming up with the anti-India rhetoric. So we see a double standard with them where nationalist agenda is being spoken, where for them, if it is India, it suddenly becomes sovereignty, it becomes a threat to our independence. But if it is elsewhere, then we see a difference. So to be able to sustain the good relationship, the beginnings of the new Muizzu India relationship, that phase that he is starting, he has to really educate his supporters on the importance of this relationship that India and Maldives have traditionally had, and how important it is for us to carry on that relationship, and that it is in our interest that we do so.
Smita, is there a Maldives model for India's neighborhood diplomacy?
I think the Maldives model is a part of India's neighborhood policy. But with every country in the neighborhood and in the last few years of tumult that we have faced, where things have suddenly really spiraled downwards very soon, we have drawn sort of new lessons right now. And one of the bigger lessons, of course, has been, as I mentioned, that I think the focus is shifting into focusing on the people, on the government to government part of it, but not really making it about personality cult, not really about betting it, putting all your eggs in one basket, not about coming across as being seen that you're backing some regime in some country. I think that definitely has been a takeaway. The other model, I don't think, which has evolved, but we need to involve a little bit more pragmatically in India is, while the external affairs minister, recently he in an interview in a press conference, he said that it's the press and it's the others who are actually hyphenating India, Pakistan. It's not the others. Similarly, I think with the China sort of fixation for us, somewhere we do need to accept that China is a reality in a neighborhood. And not every Chinese move and action is something that we can counter. At least we are not there yet. We also have our own constraints. We also have our own domestic restriction, challenges, limitations. We are also a developing economy. There are some constraints that we do face in there. But I do see a lot of convergence points. And, I think to a question that you had put to Dr. Rashid in the past, it just reminded me of this quick sort of 90 seconds of a comment I'd got from President Ranil Wickremesinghe when he was going to vote in Colombo during the presidential election. And there was a huge furor. I mean, the Sri Lankan press literally came after me because it was an exclusive. That's another story for another day. So while he was walking in, he essentially just told me that the old regime must go, it must change. So I looked at him and I asked, so are you not a part of the old regime? And he just turned around me and said, where are you from, madam? So, that answer kind of became a meme. But it does tell you that in our neighborhoods, not every time you have a new leader emerge, a lot of the old parties will have the old faces coming back into circulation, if I may use the word, or coming back into power. It will be a process of, grinding. It was quite fascinating to see some of the memes across Maldivian social media posts. I think one of them had a lot of these Maldivian men wearing a red t-shirts that said, I am sorry, India, marching together. And the meme was captioned as me trying to make up with my ex. I guess the model to think about really is that where are the real convergences that we can work? And I do see a lot of the convergence, and which is why I'm going back to President Muizzu's speeches and trying to figure out what really are his priorities. When he talks about a digital economy, hoping that that could contribute up to 15% of Maldivian GDP by 2030, when he talks about giving loans to women entrepreneurs, when he talks about climate adaptation and resilience, I think these are the areas where we are already seeing movement. We already saw a lot of decision making happen during Prime Minister Modi's visit. These are the areas where we can move forward. But I think the Maldivian model, in a sense, would also be about India, yes, exercising caution, remaining absolutely alert, because the sea lanes of communication that Mari Didi was talking about, while Maldives has real risks of oil spills and other things, but that's also the reason why Maldives is important to India, because it is in such an important geostrategic location. So the fact that, India also needs to look at that it's not just India which is important to Maldives, but Maldives also which is important to India. And thereby, of course, trying to work on the areas where India can give its best beyond just soft power, but as I said, putting money, putting resources, but being cautious of the other players, whether it's Turkey, whether it's China, or even the United States, keeping in mind what Marco Rubio has said in the last few months. So I think that's essentially the model for India right now in the neighborhood, is that, you do what you can, you aspire for more. Some things you cannot wish away, but you have to remain vigilant.
But frankly, I think as far as everybody in India recognizes China as a reality in the region. And that is the reason why we are fixated. We are not fixated because we don't understand the Chinese reality. We are fixated because we understand the Chinese reality. And yes, I take your point that we can't match the Chinese dollar for dollar, nor should we, because I think the way the Chinese spend their dollars is far more ruinous for the countries where they spend their dollars than how the Indians, spend our rupees or our dollars or whatever. But I think your point is well taken on many of the.
Sushant, that every time our neighbors get into some sort of an agreement or trade or arrangement with the Chinese, not everything can become a battle for us, because
But it
some things
isn't.
they will go into and we cannot take that as a diplomatic snub at us or a diplomatic.
No, I think you're reading too much into. I don't think that is the way it is taken, at least not at the level of the government. Everybody recognizes the reality of China. If we are going to be dealing with China, how can we tell other countries not to be dealing with China? But there are certain expectations, and I think legitimate ones, that Indian security interests, Indian concerns should also be taken care of. And I don't see any reason why India should not have those legitimate expectations out of very close partners in the region. So I think we are being uncharitable towards Indian diplomacy. There are a lot of reasons to be uncharitable, but I think this is not one of those. And I think those expectations are fairly legitimate. So I don't have any problems on that count, at least. So I'll give you the last word before we throw it up for the Q&A, Aditya. I think it was Smita who mentioned all-weather friendship. Huh? So are we moving towards an all-weather friendship with Maldives? How are you seeing the future of the relationship between India and Maldives?
I don't sense any all-weather friendship emanating from the Maldives or be it from any part of the neighborhood, especially when it comes to dealing with India. You're talking about Pakistan and China, that's a whole different case and scenario, which you know best. But I think this visit has definitely put solid ground for future India-Maldives collaboration and cooperation. What we were 1.5 years ago and what we are today, I think that's a remarkable change. Not just in not just in rhetoric, but also in substance. And I think this visit has solidified that greatly. I think a couple of things is what we are going to see in the coming days is obviously increased cooperation. What we've seen is, I think there is some understanding from the Maldives about what we expect now and what we expect them not to do in terms of red lines. And they are trying to, most of the times have honest and candid conversations about that. So on the red lines, I think we are working clearly and we are communicating efficiently. But there is the problem, one which I highlighted about was the economic issue, right? The development model that we've been talking about is that there has been a lot of debt accumulation in the Maldives now. And as you said, the Chinese have not, been there to assist, which also means that India will be the easy player to be blamed because the debts now, if you look at the MMA statistics, which is the Maldives Monetary Authority statistics, a lot of debts are owed to India. The reality is that a lot of these debts were being serviced to China, which has not been shown now, but it's just that the Indian debts have increased. And I think that will be a significant challenge. How will India and Maldives manage that? How will India convince Maldives to have more sustainable economy so that it can repay debts is a bigger question. Will Maldives be in any situation to repay those debts is something that we'll have to think about. So economically, economic stability is important for India. How will that take place? How will India react to that is a bigger question. Politically, we are seeing more of a calm atmosphere, probably because how Muizzu has been in control of the parliament, how he has passed certain legislations that avoid or rather prevent any horse trading that happens in the parliament. So that has given him one kind of confidence that he is going to stay in power for a while. But that said, there are certain red lines again from India that democracy has to be there is a certain tolerance to what level democracy can stoop in the Maldives, and I think that we have shown in the past. That said, we are neighbors. There will be new issues that will come up. There will be irritants, old, new, that will emerge. Maldives, especially Muizzu, has been someone who has been diversifying from India. Even as we see the visit, we see that Muizzu is not entirely dismissal of engaging with other nations. There are Turkish drones, the Turkish ship that has come in, defense pact with China, even as it dismissed the same with India. Now, I agree that red lines are being looked at, but he cannot ignore China altogether because, as I said, China is still one of the major lenders to the Maldives. And if Maldives has to sustain its economy, China is important and it's not going to go away. So I think China will be there. China will try to pull its leverages, compel Muizzu in a direction or two that India would not like. So I think that aspect is very much there. Then comes players like Pakistan, Turkey, who always wants to fish in our troubled waters, given the geopolitical atmosphere. There is increased defense cooperation, which again says that the reluctance that Muizzu government had in the earlier days, that is something somewhat of being shelved these days. But at the same time, his increased defense cooperation with India also means that he's inviting a lot of criticism from within his party, within his loyalists, and also with the opposition and whoever voted for him, hoping that he would uphold Maldivian sovereignty vis-a-vis India, no matter how exaggerated it was. So I think that will be a concern in the coming days. So we'll have to wait and watch how these things unfold. As I said, neighbors, we will be having issues. How we will resolve with it, till now, I think it has been very well done. But will we be able to manage the momentum is something we'll have to see.
Excellent. And now I think we can throw this open for a Q&A. We have about 20 minutes. So please identify yourself and identify whom you are asking the question to. So yes, any questions? Anybody?
Hello, I'm Shantan Mondopadhyay. I'm a junior research fellow from Jawaharlal Nehru University. My first question is to Maria Didi ma'am and Atul Rashid sir, who are from Maldives itself. I want to ask you, sir, when Muizzu started in 2023 after winning the election, they had a very diversification project in which he was trying to go other countries, going away from the India first policy of the other previous dispensation. So my question is, sir, India always had two advantages compared to other neighbors. Like India has geographical proximity and it is people-to-people connection. So where this two reasons were very pertinent in making Muizzu understand that we cannot move away from them and we need to ensure that we also take Indian interest into account while accommodating our national priority, our national growth. The second question is to any of the panelists who want to answer it. I want to ask about that Muizzu recently held a historic press conference in which was one of the largest press conference ever recorded, and in which he talked about diversification project of the economy. For fisheries, he said he will invest in fisheries. He said he will lower down the debt, and then there are increasing resentment among tourism operators because of the new foreign exchange regulation which have come across. Like when TMA and Manta Airlines, which are local airline, they are even paying salaries in Maldivian rupiah instead of paying in dollars. So I want to ask you how it's playing out in the Maldives. And in the recent context, all this foreign exchange regulation, this debt crisis, and this dollar shortages, because dollar is being priced at 30% premium in the black market, so which is a huge deterrent for the local people. Thank you.
Karunaniti from Tuticorin, very close to Malay. Traditionally, Tony used to bring, dry fish from your island and onions from Tamil Nadu. So Kehene, barrister Didi, and hello Kehene, academician Rashid. And thanks. Of course, the freebie wars. In South India also we talk about freebie wars, ABC, AAP, BJP and Congress, if I am correct. So it's everywhere, it's infectious. Maldives, we have to congratulate Maldives for its outspokenness. International advocacy for the climate crisis globally. And of course, I'm sure that he's smiling with the verdict, the ICJ verdict, now that climate harm is unlawful. Good. But historically, Maldives, we are under Commonwealth, we are close to the Queen. Now, thanks to the political landscape, international, the Maldivian government is tilting towards the Great Wall of China. It's geography which connects us. Sri Lanka and India, we're all close together. Indian Ocean is our peaceful pool. Religion binds you to the OIC. So who will help you in crisis? Maldivians, the sea level is rising gradually and the groundwater is dwindling. In fact, there are stories in Times of India that Maldivians want to buy lands. Of course, we know that you don't want to come out of Maldives. We don't want you to live in tents or like a boat people. So who will rescue you? Who will help you? Who is your true friend in crisis?
Okay. Any other questions? Yeah, please go ahead.
I'm Varghese T. Matthew. I'm a student at St. Stephen's College. So I want to ask, are foreign leaders becoming more transactional?
Why are you asking this?
I'm asking the entire panel. Anyone can answer.
If you ask somebody in specific, that will be better.
Yeah. Yeah, is it for the better? And is this the new norm or was it there in the past?
Okay. Anyone else? Yeah, please go ahead.
I am Rakesh Roshan. I am a PhD candidate from IGNOU. My question is for Dr. Ataullah. Whatever damage has been done in the field of public diplomacy, what steps that the government of the day or of the past is taking to manage the damage control and bring back tourism and bring back the angst that has caused to the Indian citizens? Thank you.
Anyone else? Or okay, fine. Last one.
My question is from Dr. Rashid. Apart from India and China, what type of engagements you as a country have with US, UK and Europe? Because we always hear India and China in regarding Maldives.
Okay, I think Q&A. So, Dr. Rashid, you want to go first?
Yes, thank you. I'll go first. Thank you for those questions. Very interesting questions, and I'll do my best to answer them. Regarding the first one, just correct me if I miss the point here. It is, in my opinion, what were the, or can be the two things that I could tell that the current government could do to ensure the relationship moves forward, right? Okay, so I'll start with that question before I go to the in times of crisis where we would go, or transactional, or the damages to recover the damages, and then the other one is about the relationship between other extra-regional actors like US, UK, and Europe. So the first one, I think we can think broadly on this one about what the government or Muizzu's government could do to maintain or further improve the relationship, or what not to do or what to do to improve. One thing is that we have to now, in terms of foreign policy, understanding foreign policy as pragmatic and also the practice of the state. The Prime Minister Modi's visit itself drives the new narrative, or the present and future narratives on where the relationship is right now. It is positive, and it is has also highlighted a lot of factors that's going to help both countries achieve mutual goals and move forward with a strengthened relationship. Now, the second part of that question is also related to another question that was asked about the damages that's been done and what the government has been doing to recover, or maybe to get back on that. Giving an example from tourism, I have not done enough or in-depth study on the behavior of the current government. Maybe Minister Maria might be in a better position with her expertise in real politics, to explain. But if I go wrong or beyond, please do correct me. Is that now there has to be an acknowledgement on the part who does something, that thing was done or not, right? So if there has been a mistake carried out by any government, there has to be an occasion where that has to be acknowledged. And from there onwards, we can build on to the actions that government or the party would be doing to improve or to not to do that. So in foreign policy, of course, there's a practice of diplomacy that actually helps both countries to communicate with each other in times of weaknesses and in times of strengths. So whatever has happened over the past year or so has been reflected in different levels of engagements between the government, between both the governments. That included high-level visits from the Maldives and to the India, as well as now the recent visit from India to Maldives, that has now become an unfolding of new approaches or an advanced level of engagement built on the previous ones. Then looking at India as an ongoing partnership, and it has been there. I must be very, very, very young when the initial incident that I'm going to talk about, that is the 1988 terrorist attack in the Maldives, where Indian government immediately responded to help us. That's a time of crisis. And of course, there were bilateral as well as regional engagements in the strategic level about who is going to help a country that's facing certain kind of trouble. And then there was a 2004 tsunami. I mean, of course, as first responders, India was one of the major partners and also supporting the country. And then there was COVID-19. Of course, again, we didn't have to actually tell in these occasions, okay, who has to come or who would we prefer to come. India will be and has been the first responder. I think that creates an identity, a mutual identity between the two countries, where Maldives has a mutual understanding and relationship with India in many, many areas when it comes to helping, or when it comes to cooperation in times of peace and in times of crisis. So all these will be important to consider in present and future relationships. And now, looking at the security sector, this is one area in which India, and also I have been studying mostly the Indo-Pacific security framework. That includes other partners as well, specifically the Quad, US, Australia, and Japan in India in that framing. So what we have with other countries are considered as extra-regional or maybe non-traditional engagements. China has been now put into that equation to understand what Maldives has been achieving in terms of development cooperation to advance the development and other aspects of Maldives. So there's an understanding that when we cooperate with other countries, or there's an understanding that we have to acknowledge that when we cooperate with other countries, that cooperation should not undermine the regional security of this region or the regional security thinking of this region. That includes the Indo-Pacific security framing of establishing a rules-based governance system in the Indian Ocean region. And this comes in line with other relationships we have that will follow on to answering the last question about what we have with UK, US, and Europe, including Australia. I will just put Australia in it. That is mostly traditionally based on governance, human development, and institution building. There's a lot of cooperation with US, UK, and European countries, as well as Australia in these areas. Development supported by human development and good governance practices, and also other institutional development, including the trade relationships that has been happening between these regions through private sector or maybe government-based frameworks. But recently, of course, US has been, as well as Australia and UK included, focused on the security relationships, because that has become more important as Maldives gets more involved in multinational as well as multilateral engagements. So security cooperation has also been a key area of focused on specifically maritime security for these states to cooperate with Maldives, that is US, UK, Australia, or European countries. I hope I've touched based on all the questions that's directed to me. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Maria Didi, would you want to answer anything?
Yes, I would. I mean, when I see what was being asked of us, the three questions, I would say that President Muizzu is stuck between a rock and a hard place. He has three ideals that he has to deal with. One is the democratic ideal, which we MDP aspire to, and the majority of the Maldivians aspire to. Then there's the nationalistic rhetoric, which he has to deal with from his own support base. And there is the Islamist ideals that he is being challenged with. Now, when Dr. Muizzu took oath, he came on international media and he spoke about thousands of Indian troops being stationed in the Maldives. The second thing he spoke about was that he doesn't believe in climate change, one of the biggest threats that's happening here. So what I'm trying to say is Dr. Muizzu became president with very limited exposure, experience. So he seemed to be not aware of what was going on in the country. I'm really sad to say it. He is our president. But no leader knows everything, then. But he has his own sets of advisors. Now, we always hear from his advisors that he is not a person who is really open to advice, neither does he take the advice of his advisors, which is why I suppose these basic mistakes, when you come into power, there was a transitional period as well when he was informed, and even in Parliament itself, I myself have gone and told the Parliament how many Indian troops were here in the Maldives. So his relative inexperience was the first sort of thing where there was a strain in the time-tested relationship that India and Maldives have had. He allowed activist rhetoric to become policy, and he himself lost the quality of a leader by the remarks he made to the media after returning from foreign countries and making those very uncouth remarks that is not appropriate for a leader of a nation to make, if I am very candid about it. And we are grateful to India for having been so tolerant and for having had the patience to play the long game. He even when he came back, he said, that we are getting all our food supplies from Turkey and wherever, we will get our medicines from world-class places. We would not have to rely on low-quality medicine or whatever. But then the hard realities of what was really going on, came, and he had to put himself down on the ground, because what was distributed as food during Ramadan also had made in India written on it. India was patient. They went ahead with, they have special prices for potatoes, onions, and whatever for the region. And under their neighborhood policy, they let us have onions and rice, whatever essential commodities at the usual price. They were patient with us. They helped us with our debt by, like allowing the debt to be repaid and like stretching it and helping us there too. So actually, as one of you all said, transactional, I think was the thing. We shouldn't become this time-tested relationship between our two countries be transactional. It is more than that. Of course, there are other international players in the region, and it will be the case as long as, because of like our maritime, where we are situated as well, with 4 major sea lanes of communication going through us, we become of strategic interest to other players as well, other actors as well. But that doesn't mean that we should forget, our priorities, where we are situated, and in an emergency or a disaster, where we can go for help, and what would be practically possible under the circumstances, and are very much dependent on where we are situated as well. We are neighbors, India and Maldives, and there is no way we can deny the geographical realities, the history, the culture, the tradition that connects us. And I am positive that we have started these talks, and President Muizzu as well has admitted to this in the statement that he gave when at the conclusion of the visit, where he said, that it is something that is based on tradition, the culture and all that. But it is very important that the government educates the public about what is meant by independence in a dependent world, where all of us are dependent on each other. It will not be easy for him in the political landscape in which he has to operate, because he came with that nationalistic agenda. Portions of his party, elements in his party, are still going on with that rhetoric. And if he doesn't balance it, and the Islamist Salafists that he has within his own party as well, he will have a lot of difficulty if he wants to keep the relationship in the sustained way that it should be between our two neighborly countries.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Smita, I wanted to say any last words.
Yeah, I'll just have some last words itself. I think, I think there are innumerable instances where definitely India has been the first responder whenever Maldives has been in crisis, whether it's water, whether it's vaccines, whether it's, of course, military operations ongoing during Operation Cactus itself. And in India, you also have a friend and partner where the leader, whichever party, whoever is in power, will not wake up one morning and write on Truth Social in all caps that you are a dead economy and, you can go and enjoy with another dead economy friend of yours. That madness is not going to happen, because that's not our style of politics. But that leads me to your answer. Of course, we're dealing with the Trump. Of course, we are in a transactional era. That is the reality. It's not to say that the world that was there in the past was a perfect world, but I do feel that there was a greater moral compass. That's a subject of another discussion that I'm happy to come back for. Some call it strategic decisions. Some call it that this is basically in our sovereign interest. Those things and those calculations will be there. But I do hope that, after this reset, President Muizzu kind of does realize that at the end of the day, you can deal with a lot of nationalist and hyper-nationalist rhetoric when you're campaigning. When you're governing, it's a different ballgame. And while governing, it is pragmatism that is needed. So same applies for, of course, even in India and the countries that are here. I think we do need to be respectful of people, each other, avoid hyperbole. That's a lesson for media who, actually made it sound like Donald Trump is Mr. Modi's best friend in the last few months. And look, all that hyperbole doesn't really serve you any real sort of thing. It kind of misleads citizens about what really could happen or the future paths that you could have to tread on. I think Maldives is a great place. I don't know how many of you have actually gone to Maldives in the room here?
Not rich enough.
Not rich enough, yeah. So that's the difference. Because journalists who were there in Maldives right now, people that they were interacting with, they kept on making the point that, can we just keep politics aside? We really need this business from India. We love Indian tourists, because unlike the Indian tourists who are heading out to Thailand or to other Southeast Asian nations who are budget tourists, the ones heading to Maldives are essentially luxury tourists. They do bring in a lot of tourism GDP, tourism revenue to the country. It's a beautiful country. I mean, I was just recalling my experience of SAARC coverage of the summit, which was the only time I could travel, because I had an organization that sent me there.
On other people's money.
Yeah, on the organization's money, who sucked blood out of me because I was a correspondent. It wasn't other people. It was my hard-earned money. But there were such fantastic conversations we were having, because it's a small island nation. To go to one place and the other atoll and the other island, you did have to take ferries and stuff. And because it was SAARC, there were a lot of logistical challenges. We ended up having so many on-record, off-the-record conversations with the India, Pakistan, Afghan, South Asian foreign ministers and other top leaders, because there was nothing better to do. We were all bumping into each other constantly. And that gave us a lot of good time to converse. So I think people really, we have that capacity in India, given our market size and domestic population, that Lakshadweep's infrastructure can also be developed. And when it does, it can also have its fair share of tourists, without compromising or without having to snap out at the Indian tourists who are heading to Maldives. That's the kind of, I think, mutual respect that the two countries need to work at.
I'll just take one question on diversification, but before I go there, I just wanted to add something to Smita's. I'll just add something, a funny conversation that I had with with Maldivians when I was there. It was when Muizzu was elected to power, and there was a lot of this conversation about what is happening between India and Maldives or China. I was just talking to a couple of friends, and then one of them came to me, brother, who cares whether it's India or China? At the end of the day, we just want that bridge to be built. So that speaks a lot. There are political sections who want to politicize all of it, but at the end of the day, what matters to the Maldives right now is the basic infrastructure, which I think is what they're aspiring for. So I think we're heading to that direction. Finally, on the question of diversification, there has been a lot of push for diversification because tourism is something that has dictated its economy for a long time. The economy, the financial distress, the debts that have to be repaid. I think overall they're pushing Maldives to rethink that they have such a strategic location, but they have not been able to leverage it. So Muizzu has come up with this whole project of gateway in the northern Maldives, coming up with new, special economic zones in certain aspects of the Maldives, and also pushing for agricultural zones. So I think overall there has been a push, but that's, again, taking into consideration the longer term effects and implications that has Maldives economy thinking throughout. So I think there has been a genuine push for diversification. India has expressed interest in investing some of them, including the digital projects. But again, we'll have to see how much that could be implemented, considering the economic situation he is in, the political necessities that come with it. Muizzu is in a tight spot, right? Just to sum up, and he'll have to work on that now.
Thanks, Aditya. Thanks, Maria Didi. Thanks, Dr. Rashid and Smita. I'll just say one thing to a question which was asked on transactionalism. All relationships are transactional. International, personal, you name the relationship, it's all transactional. Now, some transactional relationships are long-lasting and have a deeper kind of a transactionalism around them. Some are purely transactional. And I think we should not be confused on that count. Yes, there was a time before the European nations started dictating how the world is going to run, when it was not all transactional. When there was, as Smita said, there was a certain amount of morality attached to how nations dealt with each other. But I think since the Europeans have started dictating terms to the rest of the world, transactionalism is the name of the game. I don't know how long the Europeans will continue to dictate to the rest of the world, but until they hold the cards, I think it's a given thing that all relationships between India-US, between India-Russia, between India-China, China-Pakistan, it's all transactionalism. Some long-term, some short-term. But with my pearl of wisdom, I think we can end this conversation. Thank you, everybody, for being a part of it. And thanks for braving to come here today on an extremely rainy day. I hope you all reach home in time. I know I'm not going to, but thanks a lot.